Hey everybody, how are you doing today? Scott Brearley from Soulmates and Suitcases and Forward Walking Choices, the coach of my perfect storm. So I'm bringing you this podcast today. We're interviewing Scott Brearley, this amazing gentleman that has lived a pretty crazy life, and I'd like to introduce him, Scott Brearley. Hey everybody, how you doing? Scott Brearley. You know, I was introduced that I'd lived an incredible and an amazing man, and it's like I kind of have a little bit of a hard time with that. I'm just a guy. I've led a lot of different circumstances, and some of my circumstances back when they were happening, society and the doctors hadn't really come up with some of the stuff. They didn't know much about trauma. They didn't know much about ADHD when I was a kid. I was just a brat. And, from there on in, like I got hit by a car at 7 and it went downhill from there. So I'm not sure what else I could say to that. There's addiction, there's drug abuse, there's sexual abuse, there's everything that has happened to me. And sometimes I created it. And was that because of ADHD, or am I an alcoholic addict? Or, the last few years I've really questioned that. So Scott, can you share details a little bit about your head injuries and how they affected your life and how you managed to cope with them all? It must have been pretty tragic, some of the stuff. Yeah, I'm not quite sure if it was tragic. It's just the way it was, and that's kind of how I looked at things most of my life. It's just the way it is. And I struggled with my anger for years, and I couldn't understand why I couldn't get any help when I went for therapy, like counseling. I kind of termed it talk therapy. So, and then in doing the 12 steps, I would get a smidge of freedom, and it really wouldn't go any further. And then I would get into a relationship, and I wouldn't know how to live in a relationship because I wasn't taught very well about relationships. And I'm a slow learner, and then I would get loaded again and start the whole cycle all over again. So I never really learned to cope with my anger and my head injuries, and because for decades I never even really thought about the head injury part, and there wasn't the data and there wasn't the public information about that aspect of life. And so I'm not don't really know how to answer that question anymore. So Scott, I understand you were court ordered at 15 to go to Alcoholics Anonymous. How did that make you feel? Like at 15, that's pretty drastic measures. And what circumstances led up to you getting court ordered at 15 to go to Alcoholics Anonymous? Well, I think from the head injuries and from being in the hospital a long time after the tragic accident when I was 7, there's some theories of addiction that they put out that I somewhat believe is true, and I'm not really 100% sure if it is or not yet, because the jury's out for discussion on that one. So anyways, we have this saying in Narcotics Anonymous that our addiction's doing push-ups when we don't use, and it's prepping us for the next time we get loaded, unless you find your spiritual remedy. And I believe from when I was 7 in the hospital for the months that I was there and medicated on whatever drug they medicated on me, I believe I was doing push-ups after that for my addiction. And so when I was 11 and I started using, I went at it like an animal right from day one. And so by the time I was 15, getting court ordered to AA, I was drinking fairly on a regular basis. I was getting stoned every other day or every chance I got. And so circumstance led my older brother that I had problems with my whole life. We got into a fight, and I ended up in a correctional facility, and they came up with going to AA. So Scott, how have you managed the huge changes and the pivotal moments in your decisions to stay sober, and also Like the challenge of sobriety to stay sober for 23 years, that's pretty incredible. And so how do you cope with that? Well, in the beginning, I went to lots and lots of meetings, and I thought I had found what I needed there. And I did. I found a solution to my drink and drug problem. And like when I came back 23 years ago, I knew in my heart that the 12 steps wouldn't work for me. And one of the pivotal moments, I had this guy, Mike Perrier, came up to me and he goes, "So it won't work for you, right?" And I'm like, "No." And he goes, "It'll work for millions of other people, but it won't work for you." And for some reason I heard that, and I decided to commit myself to the program. But here lies kind of the problem. I committed to myself to just the program, and I thought I was living life good, and I thought, but the chaos and the drama would just roll, and I never knew what to do, and I never knew how to get out of it. And no matter what I tried, no matter how many times I did the steps, the chaos and drama kept going. So it wasn't until in my 50s that I started making some shifts. And that's a little bit more long in this journey. So, yeah. So Scott, we understand you had several attempts at staying sober and several relapses through the time. And it kind of baffles me. That somebody after 6.5 years clean would get loaded again. And like I understand, you've had several 1 years and a few 2 years, a few 3 years. What possibly could make somebody go out? First off, for somebody to go out, we need to be spiritually bankrupt. And I'm not talking religious bankrupt, I'm just talking spiritual inside. For me to get out, when I went out, I was angry, bitter, resentful, and lonely, and people would always say, meeting makers make it. People that do what we do make it. Well, I did what they did, and I wasn't making it. And I'm not bashing the programs because they're freaking brilliant to a point. But my emotional capacity and my emotional stability, and on top of that, the head injuries that I didn't really know about, I'm going to say caused me to go out. And I know it's a decision today. However, I believe once you're in a cycle, your decisions are almost taken away from you. And when you can finally find a treatment for what ails you, because I always thought I treated myself because I was an alcoholic and I had these things that AA calls the isms. And I guess you could call ADHD isms, or you could call trauma isms. However, I'm not really sure about that. And then there's another aspect that they talk about, character defects. Well, I don't really believe I'm defective. I believe I'm a work in progress, and I also believe that once you're kind of diagnosed, besides AA, by a bunch of people that are just people, not doctors, and I don't believe in mainstream medicine. I'm talking the guys that think out of their box, like Dr. Amen, and there's a few people like that don't really agree. Dr. Gabor, their methodology about it being more about trauma really works. And like over the years, I don't know, like the big book was written in 1935 or something like that. And like, that's old school knowledge on alcoholism. They have so much more new, they don't even call it alcoholism, or like not even the SUDS, I think. Anyways, something like that. And I stay out of the debating because I don't really care what they call it. I just know I had a problem with drinking, and today I don't have a problem with drinking. And one of the biggest reasons is I stayed long enough without drinking. And then it gave me the option when I started learning that there's more. And that's kind of why I'm doing these podcasts with my friends, is so people can learn more. Because if we only go to AA or NA or CA or DA or whatever AA you want, we're kind of only doing a little bit of this on the spectrum. Like there's so much more to great health, because that's what recovery is. To go to Alcoholics Anonymous and not drink, that's just staying sober. Now, do you want recovery or do you want to stay sober? Because I'm sure as hell I want recovery. And the other part is, once you get recovery, you build this thing called a life. And a life that's not worth burning to the ground. And it's funny, like a lot of people I hear in the rooms go, man, I'm terrified to go out. Well, however, you know what? I'm not scared to drink, or I'm not scared to drug anymore, because the biggest fact is I'm more scared that I got to come back and have to go through the first day again, or the first 30 days again, and then the first year. And you know what? Staying here is way better than that. So in our future talks, you were telling me that you got divorced just before 50 after a long-term relationship, or at least long-term for you. And then shortly after that, you get diagnosed with prostate cancer. And shortly after that, you get diagnosed with diabetes. You struggled with work. Like, how did you ever cope with all that getting thrown in at you? And I believe your dad died somewhere in there, and your brother died, and your niece died. You know, a lot of people that would drive out and you stayed sober and clean. Could you explain that? You know, actually, that's one thing that I can't explain, because all my behaviors, all my actions, I really did go out, I just didn't pick up. I was angry, I was bitter, I was resentful. I reeked toxicity, and I pushed everybody out of my life, and even sabotaged work all the time. I just couldn't get along with people. And you know, I was broken to a point that I thought I would never return from. And you know, in a sense, I didn't return from it, because I came out on the other side a stronger, a more carefree man, a man that wants to inspire the world. And it's like, there's no reason, like I don't need to drug or use over anything. And that was the biggest thing. And prostate cancer was, I wanted to die so bad, and the aftermath was so hard, but I was so done with getting self-help groups that I couldn't even go for cancer self-help, because I just was so scared and so tired and defeated that maybe I didn't feel I was worthy. Maybe I didn't feel like I had any hope. Not maybe, I knew I didn't have any hope. And then all of a sudden I got diabetes after that, and it's like, now I can't eat junk food? Like, come on, like junk food is where it's at, because it's like the only thing I got left to medicate myself. And that's the truth, to medicate myself. The sugars, the crap, and you know, that's how I coped. Anger, sugar, using, really. So really, am I 23 years clean and sober with all the crap that I've used? Man, I smoked for the first 15 years of it or longer. And that's a form of stuff and feelings, and a form of just making yourself feel better with outside stuff. And I'm sure I still have areas in my life that I make myself feel better with outside stuff. However, I know it's getting healthier and healthier as the years go by. That almost sounds like you were at the jumping off stage. Like you didn't want to live anymore. Like, that's a pretty terrifying spot. Like, how was your family in all this, and how were they supporting you? And you must not have been living any kind of quality of life. Well, I was making really good money, so in my brain I was doing really good. And I was at work all the time, and I think I just used work and junk food and anything I could do to make myself feel better besides pick up drinking or drugging. And then, like I said, when I got diabetes, it blew the world off my socks. But however, I decided to call a nutritionist coach and talk to them about diet. For the first time in my life, I'm having to make some decisions, real decisions. because and it dawned on me through the diabetes processes, nobody's coming to save me. It's up to me to save me. Everybody's input and everybody telling you what to do and suggestions, they're great to a point. However, we really know what we need inside. And over the course of time and learning how to make decisions, and the diabetes thing was where I learned it, because making a decision, whatever I put in here controls my diabetes or my sugar counts. And with control of my sugar counts by food, I'm not using medication. But what happens when you eat properly, your brain starts to function a little bit better. And in there somewhere, I started to take some group coaching for the weekends, and it's actually kind of funny. I took the first 3-day one that I took. They, of course, by day 3, they're trying to upsell me to the next course, and you got to remember, I'm still angry and bitter. And it's like, how dare they upsell me for the next course? I paid for this one. They shouldn't be trying to rip me off and pay for the next one. But I went out to my motorcycle and I started to get on my bike, and it dawned on me that if my bike mechanic told me I had to put money into my bike to be able to ride it the next day, I would drop my credit card down in a heartbeat. And then all of a sudden it's like, what's wrong with you? You want to go home and die, but yet you won't invest in yourself. Like, there's something really wrong with that. No self-esteem, no hope, well, in that moment, I walked back in and I paid for the course. Hey, Scott, we're going to have to leave it at that. We're cutting it short today, and I really want to appreciate you being on the show, and I look forward to having you on the show again to do another section. So thank you very much.
I know we'll win the fight, baby, it's you and me, here's to the rest of our life.